You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. We got a lot to talk about today. I was kind of surprised. We were talking before the show. We're going to talk PECOTA projections. We're going to talk about some weird roster moves that, to me, indicate there was a plan that didn't work out, and they had to change which guy they wanted to essentially get rid of and dump off the 40-man and reacquired off of waivers a guy that was just dumped. So there's a lot we're going to get into, Ed. You're feeling better? You seem like you're doing better. People keep asking me.
I am feeling better. I am doing better. It's a slow process, but I'm getting there. You know, it's gonna be a while before I'm back to complete fighting shape, but I will get there.
All right, excellent. And I've had a lot of people ask me recently, and I haven't talked about it very much, but yes, I am divorced. It's finally over.
You are. You're doing better than I am.
That thing is over, and people keep asking me how I'm doing, and the thing is, I didn't want to talk about it while you're still in the court case because it was a nasty one. It really was. There was a lot of stuff where it was like there was an agreement in the summer, and then she backed out of it, and it cost a ton of money. Basically, a lot of money was spent on lawyers to end up with about the same amount of money changing hands. It was the dumbest thing in the world. Divorce is terrible. When you get to the end of it, it's glorious. My feed knows I'm divorced over the last little while, and it continues to show me the Louis C.K. bit where he talks about how divorce is forever, and he's smiling about how wonderful it is. And it is a wonderful thing. And even after this whole thing happened and everything else like that, I got to tell you, I'm as happy as you could possibly be. I mean, I got the house, I got the kids, I got the car, the dog. Things all worked out really well. I started dating in the summer. I love this divorce thing. I recommend it to everybody.
You and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum. What I'm going through right now, I don't recommend. Don't do it.
You're going through a rough time. And I feel terrible for you. And everybody keeps going, Chris, how you doing? How you doing with the divorce? Divorce is wonderful. It's just amazing. I will tell you this, dating apps, kind of stupid. All right? I've met one person off a dating app, pretty cool. Otherwise, dating apps, kind of stupid. But, a lot of fun out there. I'm really enjoying the whole divorce thing. So for those that have asked about it, and I know I haven't talked about it, and I get messages about it all the time, how you doing? I'm great. Divorce is awesome. And I'm cuter than I thought I was, it seems like. And that's kind of nice
brother.
Too. Turns out I'm kind of a daddy. I don't know what to tell you. I got the perfect combination. A dad bod, owns his own company. I'm doing well. You, heart attack, not so well. But you're recovering, and that's a good thing. And maybe one day, Ed, you could have the amount of happiness that I have in life.
We'll see about that. But, in the meantime, I have Jacob Amaya's White Sox career to look forward to.
I can't believe he's back. I don't get it.
This is one where just when I think I understand, I kind of get what Chris Getz is doing. I kind of understand the process here. I see where, he took a chance on a guy that was a highly rated prospect that's not panned out. And then when he didn't pan out, he was ruthless about it. He let him go in favor of somebody else. And he comes back because the Orioles didn't really want him either, which I didn't understand why the Orioles claimed him in the first place, but thanks, guys.
Well, here's the weird thing about this. So you dump Amaya to make room on the 40-man roster. So you're saying, this is how I always imagined it, Ed. And maybe I'm crazy, but I always imagine it if you're the general manager of a Major League Baseball team, and you have to keep 40 guys on a roster, and that's your limit, your protected 40-man roster. And there's rules for who has to be on it, and rules for how you get rid of a guy off it, and guys passing through waivers designated for assignment, all this stuff like that, right? You should know who the 40th guy is. If it's not an automatic 40th guy, let's say who your worst pitcher is that you would dump, and who your worst position player is that you would dump, and who's at the bottom of your catching list that you would dump. You should have a few guys that are earmarked as, well, if all of a sudden a deal falls in my pocket today, something just happens out of the blue and I got to dump somebody, it's definitely this guy over here. So when Amaya gets released because they have to make room, my assumption is that's because he's the worst guy on that list. That's because the general manager and the brain trust inside the front office already knows that he's not the guy. that he's the first one that goes the moment that I need to make room. Like right now, they have a pitcher who's the first one that goes the moment they need to make room. They've got a player who's the first one that goes the moment they need to make room. That's what I would expect from every team in professional baseball. Heck, it's what you see on the big board during Hard Knocks, essentially, when I'm watching that on HBO before a football season. What the White Sox did here is weird because they said Jacob Amaya was definitely that guy and dumped him. And now Zach DeLoach is DFA'd to make room for Amaya coming back on, a month or so later. And what that makes me feel is that all this bluster about Colson Montgomery could break camp as a shortstop, and us asking the question, what if that doesn't work out? Who's going to stand at short? Because you don't have anybody who can really defensively stand there. Jacob Amaya now might be back on the roster because of that. And that begs the question, was there somebody they were looking to sign in the last month or so that they weren't able to get? And so I went to the free agent list and just tried to look at who's been signed that they may have been looking at. Like maybe they were going to grab a guy. Like I don't think they were going for Ha-Seong Kim. I mean, he just signed a 2-year deal. I don't think that was something they were going to go and do. Yeah, Tim Anderson signed a minor league contract with the Angels on the 22nd of January. I can't imagine that the plan was to bring Timmy back. Like I don't think that's what they were going to do. Adam Frazier, I think, has played some shortstop. He's back with the Pirates. That's recent in the last week or so. So, there's a few guys who are middle infielders that can stand at short, but I don't know if anybody really stands out to me as this must have been their plan. It didn't work out, and it was we got to bring back Jacob Amaya if he shows up on waivers again, right? It's a strange thing. You had him already. You dumped him because you didn't think he was worth anything, and now you're sending a young outfielder that I thought showed at least a little bit of promise. I was surprised that you were dumping him off the 40-man today, but Zach DeLoach is now DFA'd, and Amaya's back off of waivers from the Orioles.
Yeah, it just begs the question when we talk about roster construction and having enough depth to make sure that you have every position covered, especially if you're not going to go out into the free agent market and say that, Ha-Seong Kim is our top target and he's a guy we expect to stand at short for the next couple of years. Or Jorge Polanco, who just re-signed with the Mariners, even though he's coming off of a really bad year. It's just not having that plan beyond Colson Montgomery, a prospect who struggled, showed some signs of life in the Arizona Fall League, but struggled last year at AAA. You can't rely on him. And you've got a lot of infielders that are not really plus defenders. So it makes you kind of wonder, like you said at the outset of it, if Zach DeLoach is a guy that you figure you could live without or was going to pass through waivers, and you don't really have plans for him to make the team if he's got that uphill battle, which I think he does because we talked about the outfield before and how with Andrew Benintendi and Austin Slater and Luis Robert Jr. is not going to get traded before the season starts. And you have players out there that you're going to have, Mike Tauchman, another guy that you're going to have out there, that DeLoach is a guy that's very much on the fringes. Well, why wasn't DeLoach the one that was DFA'd in the first place? If you figured that you needed the middle infield depth because defensively you don't have a shortstop. So it just smacks of like...
It smacks of a mistake. It smacks of like a mistake was made and then they were like, oh, wait a minute. Don't we need another guy who could stand at short in case of an emergency here? Like that's what it kind of smacks of. And that's weird because I haven't seen a lot of weird mistakes out of the new front office. And so I want to go back here. Amaya is originally... He's gone off the White Sox to the Orioles on the 16th of January. So some of those names I gave, they weren't even around. So there's only been like two, three guys.
Nicky Lopez went to the Cubs, last week?
Okay, so but that's the thing. You also got rid of him, didn't you? You weren't really interested in him. So it's just strange to me, like, what was the plan for the last couple of weeks? Why did you DFA? Why did you let go of Amaya if you felt like you needed him? Because you brought him right back again. It's a strange thing that 3 weeks ago DeLoach was on their board more valuable than Amaya, and nobody's grabbed the bat since then. Like nothing should have changed in the evaluation in the last 3 weeks. I think that's the perplexing thing to me. Like I want that question asked. I know it's a dumb question. I know it means nothing. I know that like it has nothing to do with like the long-term health of the team and what they're going to do in spring. And we'd be in trouble if we saw Jacob Amaya on the roster. I'd be like, oh no, like that. So hopefully he's released in 3 days and that could happen. I'm just curious as to what the thought process was here. Meanwhile, your thought process when it comes to switching to a new age of life should be with Hyatt Home Medical Equipment, keeping mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living, make so they can get around on their own and live independently with stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Hyatt Home Medical Equipment works with insurance. They have 0% financing for qualified individuals. CPAP machine users, if you're unhappy with your vendor, switch now. Get supplies directly mailed to you, and you can test out all the latest and greatest in CPAP technology in their big, beautiful showroom on the southwest side of Chicago. They also have continuous glucose monitors and so much more. Learn all about Hyatt Home Medical Equipment at hhme.com. But this whole move, like to me, I look at it and I go, this is kind of a strange little thing with the one guy getting let go of, and then a couple weeks later you grab him again and let go of another guy. What happened in those rankings? Or do you not have them? Am I just more organized than the front office of the White Sox?
Well, and that would be the scary part. Not because you're a disorganized chap. You're a very organized fellow over there, but the idea is that, I mean, one of the things is that just look at the outfield depth, like I was saying. I mean, Zach DeLoach is a guy that's on the 40-man. If you don't really have any plans for Zach DeLoach, because frankly, his numbers and MLB trade rumors in their write-up of the Amaya transaction here even noted it, that his batting average, his peripherals all stay the same. He just hit less home runs in Charlotte last year than he had the year before for the Mariners minor league team. If DeLoach is a guy that you didn't want, and you've got plenty of other outfielders, you still have Dominic Fletcher, you still have Oscar Colas hanging around. There's still guys there that you're giving an opportunity to.
That's the guy, Colas. Let's stop there for a second. That's the guy I didn't think that Getz liked.
Well, right.
I mean, like, was it really Pedro didn't like Colas? Because again, you're dumping an outfielder. Getz brought DeLoach in. Colas is a guy that it seemed like they had no interest in last year. None at all. So was that really the manager? We always kind of ask that question. Was that really the manager pushing him out? Because when it came time to pick up an infielder and dump an outfielder in this weird move, you kept Oscar Colas and you let go of Zach DeLoach, who was an acquisition. It was one of the early acquisitions, one of the first ones, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a Gregory Santos trade.
Getz brought him in, though, right? That was the Getz move.
No, that was Prelander Baroa, a competitive draft pick, and Zach DeLoach for Gregory Santos.
Right, and he's already decided I'm done with DeLoach, but he's holding on to Colas after Colas didn't really get a lot of opportunity last year, and you try to figure out why was that. I've always said this. About human beings, right? I mean, again, I just mentioned at the beginning of the show, my divorce. My ex was famous for this. There'd be one story, but if you waited long enough, you would hear the other story, right? And then you'd be like, oh, hold on a second. 6 months ago, that wasn't the truth. So it's also similar here, right? Like, I remember long enough back to see that the White Sox weren't giving Oscar Colas a big chance, and it felt like DeLoach was getting more of a chance. And DeLoach is a Getz guy. So what happened? And what was the reason why Colas wasn't up? And does he actually have a chance now? Is there something that they saw where they're like, they're going to bring him up? Or was it the manager who just didn't want him around because he didn't like something about him? There's something weird there, because you would have thought he'd be the name that would have gotten dropped off, not DeLoach.
Well, and it's entirely possible that Colas just simply has the higher ceiling still. And much like Luis Robert Jr., if Oscar Colas can build some sort of equity in spring training, if he can break camp with the team and show that he can hit a little bit in the majors, even if Getz doesn't like him, it's better than DFAing him, right? Whereas Zach DeLoach has an opportunity, honestly, to make it through waivers. He's not special in any way, shape, or form. There's nothing about Zach DeLoach that lit anybody's fires anyway. He was sort of the odd man out in Seattle because they've got a lot of young outfielders, and he became an odd man out in Chicago because they decided to go with, veteran guys rather than give him an extended opportunity. So you just sort of wonder, right? You sort of wonder if there's something about Colas still, if there's something about some of the Kenny Rick guys that we were told were going to be the saviors of Southside baseball, that Getz is still seeing something there, or Ryan Fuller is seeing something there that he can help fix, or Will Venable saw something where he's
like,
all
off of tape though? But I mean, is that all off of tape with those guys? I mean, those guys haven't actually seen these players. So they're coming in, they're evaluating off of tape because they're not working with them right now.
No, I mean, it may be off of tape. It may very well be off of tape. It may very well be off of talking to, your Justin Jershell is still here. He was the Charlotte manager, so you're still having conversations like what's he doing down there that he wasn't doing up here, and he might have something that he saw, right? You still have some coaches around that worked with a guy like Oscar Colas that can provide some insight, and it may just be as simple as, look, Ryan Fuller might have a way to sit there and say a guy who's a little too free swinging, or a guy who's pulling off, trying to go for the big moonshot home runs, if that's what Colas was doing. If there is something that's obvious on tape, maybe he's got an idea, and that's all that counts. Either that, or maybe it's just that, in this case, Getz is looking at it going, look, this guy still has, there's still some possibility here with this guy that maybe I can squeeze something out of him, whether it's on the roster or, as a trade chip, but I got to rebuild him. I got to build him back up to where he was a hot prospect a couple years ago.
So now let's talk about these PECOTA projections, which I don't get too excited about. Some people really dive into them, right? Like, oh, this is what we're supposed to win this year. And we all know this team isn't winning anything this year, and especially because we're spending the first half of the show talking about the reacquisition of Jacob Amaya. So we all know nothing great is happening this year. Nothing. Okay. Maybe we see some development. Like, that's what I'm really hoping for this year. Like, who's going to develop? Who's going to become a star? Who's going to become something with upside? How is this team going to form? I expressed last week, I love the pitching. Let's see it take another step. Let's start seeing a really strong rotation start to come together. Let's figure out if we have any position players of the future that we can really kind of hang our hat on, and what are they going to do to fill the additional holes, and what is going to happen at the catcher position, which I think is strong. Will it still be, in my mind, strong by the end of the year? And what will this manager be like? Is he going to give me faith that when he finally starts getting good players around him, that he's going to be able to win? And is he going to gain us a few wins this year? Or are we just going to be sitting there saying, well, it's not his fault that the team is terrible? I mean, those are the storylines really for this year, not winning. But PECOTA has us at what, Ed? What are they projecting?
61.5 wins over 100.5 losses. So your over-under is basically 100 on losses.
All right. I'm taking the over on wins. I don't think the White Sox lose 100 games. I'm going to say that right now, officially, on February the 5th, 2025 on Sox in the Basement. I don't believe the White Sox lose 100 games. Now, before everybody gasps and says, well, you're crazy, because what I'm essentially saying is that I'm putting more than 20 wins on last season with this team. They're going to win more than 20 games higher than what they had last year. That's how bad they were last year. But you're
basically saying they could have a 65-win season.
But here's the thing. I am going to stick to my belief all last season that the manager of the team was a massive detriment to the team.
Absolutely.
I still believe that Pedro Grifol made that team exponentially worse than what they were. That were they a last place team? Yes. But could they have been a fourth place team? With a good manager, they could have been. He couldn't pull them out of any of those big streaks. He allowed that team to flounder. That locker room was lost. You could tell by the way that the players were talking in response to what he would say. There was no respect in that room. And when you're in a locker room like that and it snowballs, you get the last month of the season. Like, I think I look at this team and I say the beginning part of the year was totally on Pedro. And the end of the year was because all hope was gone because of what happened in the beginning part of the year. And I think you can immediately erase 20 or 30 losses just by having a stable manager in there and a system, the way you play. And if this pitching comes along, good pitching is going to win you some ball games. They are not a team that's going to compete for anything this year. But I do not believe they're a 100-loss team, and they shouldn't be trying to be a 100-loss team because you don't get the benefit anymore that you used to get for having a terrible record. Now with this draft lottery, you don't get the same benefit. So it's stupid to throw games, and it's stupid to try to lose a bunch. You should go out there and start building a winning attitude, and I think this manager, and I think what they're going to put together out on the field, and not having Pedro Grifol out there, is going to be the difference, and that's why I would easily take the over on wins, and I would say they're not going to lose 100 games. I know that everybody thinks I'm nuts for saying it. I just don't believe that's what they are. Are they going to be bad? They're going to be bad. Are they going to be 100 loss bad? I don't think so.
No, and I agree with you. I don't think they're 100 loss bad, especially because the division, if you believe in these PECOTA rankings, the division is topped by the Minnesota Twins with 86.2 wins projected. Okay. The teams from there, it's 81.1 for Kansas City, 80.4 for Cleveland. They basically give them a 500 team. And then just under that, at 79.4 is the Tigers. And I don't know if that's before they factor in Jack Flaherty being re-signed. Maybe the Tigers are a little bit better. But still, if you're talking about an 86-win Central champion, okay, that means that the entire division is weak, and you're not going to be, the White Sox aren't going to be as big of a punching bag this year. They can't be. Nobody can be as big of a punching bag as they were last year. And you're going to have some opportunities where Pedro lost you games, right? You're going to have some opportunities to rectify that. Not to mention the fact that, I mean, honestly, think about like what Edgar Caro said, a few weeks ago when we were talking about them. There's guys that are going to be on this team coming up that are not going to be Nicky Lopez, who is just kind of hanging around the major leagues. It's not going to be, you're not really going to have Andrew Benintendi play as poorly as he did in the first half of last season. I think he has a pretty good season. I think he has a much better season.
I think he has a bounce back year, and you'll be sitting around going, do you want to move this guy? And that'll be one of the things they're talking about. They're going to be talking about Robert early on in the season, and if Robert gets out of the gate quick, and Benintendi, wild prediction for the White Sox. Wild prediction. Luis Robert Jr. comes back closer to what he was in 2023 than what he was in 24. And Andrew Benintendi reverts back to what his mean is after looking at a long enough career that you know what he should be and what he wasn't last year. Now he comes in with a new attitude saying, I don't want to have a season like that ever again. And you take those two guys and you bring them back closer to what their baseball card says that they should be. And somehow they're healthy. I know you always got to throw that caveat in there, but somehow they're healthy. And now you got Mike Tauchman out there who's a legitimate baseball player, not a superstar, but a legitimate baseball player sitting up at the top of your order. And again, I don't have a ton of faith in Andrew Vaughn, but I don't expect him to be
a replacement level.
I don't expect him to be as bad as he was last year. In fact, knowing how things go for me, I'm going to just put myself into this. If I've complained about a guy as much as I've complained about Andrew Vaughn, he is going to come out red hot the first 2 months. They're going to have something switched in his swing. He's going to have a new lease on life. Everybody's going to be like, Chris, you're an idiot. Now, if these things happen and you have this young pitching, hungry, ready to start the season with fresh arms, right? These guys are ready to go. And you've got a few names that might be ready to go. They could win. They could be a team that's close to 500 by the end of May. And then they'll fall off. And then they'll be bad. And then they'll end up with 95 losses. But you could see this team do some fun stuff early on, and you might actually hear maybe they can move Benintendi. I don't think that they're a team that competes for anything, but I do think you're going to have a much different start to this year than last year. Last year, they just walked out onto the field, a giant hole opened up, and the team just fell into hell. That's what happened. And Pedro the whole way down was screaming, it's going to be fine. Any minute now we'll hit the bottom and bounce back up. And it never happened.
Yeah, Pedro Grifol was a guy that thought the airplane was made out of rubber when it was burning on the way down and figured it was going to bounce. It's like, I agree with what you say, because one of the things that you need to do if you're Will Venable and this new coaching staff is all you kind of have to do really is look back at what was it that they were trying to do last year with some of these guys. And Andrew Vaughn was supposed to become a power hitting first baseman. Andrew Benintendi was supposed to adjust his swing so that he was going to hit more home runs, especially at home because the park plays favorably, right? And he's not a power hitting guy. And Luis Robert Jr. is expected to be an all-world superstar, and he's found himself in the middle of an offense where nobody was contributing anything at the beginning. So if Venable is even able to go out there and sit there with some of these veterans and say, look, play your game, Okay, run when I tell you, hit and run when I tell you, bunt when I tell you, play the field where I position you. Just listen to what I'm telling you to do. Read the scouting reports I give you, all that stuff. If he's able to set them up for success, but really just tell them, like, do what got you here. Sometimes that's all it is. Because I remember distinctly we were talking about, what does Andrew Benintendi do to bulk up to become a home run hitter for the first time in an already established career? And all you and I could figure out was, what did he say? Something about, like, he likes pasta?
Yeah, he was eating pasta. Like, I don't want to hear any of that. I don't want to hear any of that stuff. That was worse than I'm in the best shape of my life. I mean, like, look, a lot of things can happen here that would also bolster them getting out of the gate. Like, what is going to happen with Drew Thorpe? He had surgery, right? He had the bone spur in his right elbow, and he just had to get a cortisone shot. And coming out of Sox Fest Live, that was one of the stories that, like, he basically said, everything's clean. Structurally, I'm good. Everything looks good. This is just part of the surgery process. But then sends out like a text message to the beat reporters, essentially saying, setbacks happen, but he's going to have a full season and he should be ready to go by April. And when I hear that makes me nervous, because I think starting pitchers need that whole spring training to really get ramped up. So I don't think he's ready to start the year. But I also think he's the kind of guy that once he's ready and he's at full strength, I think you're going to see this guy be pretty good this year. But it all depends on his health. That's another guy that could add to wins. Jonathan Cannon stops trying to win the whole game on his own and just falls into what he's capable of doing. He's going to have a better season out there on the mound. You're going to see some of these young guys get here halfway through the season. It's going to be really interesting. I think the pitching thing is the key. Like, Benintendi and Robert getting closer to what you believe that they were going to be. A couple of these younger players, couple of these role players you brought in doing what you expect them to do. Not anything more. Like, I'm not asking for anybody to have a career season. Just do what you're expected to do. Don't kick the ball around too much. Have a competent manager making, like, reasonable decisions, and watch some of the young pitchers start pitching. Again, you're not going to the playoffs. You're not a 500 team, but you're not going to lose 100 games. And I think that's why PECOTA's actually got them right there on that line of 62 and 100. Like, they're right there by that line of the 100 loss. When it's funny, if you listen to White Sox fans, they're just assuming it's going to be a 110 loss season. And I think that those projections actually are saying, wait a minute, some of these players are better than how they performed last year and just naturally should revert back into more production. But they can't take into account young guys taking the next step. And the young guys take the next step, they're easily doing better than 62 and 100.
Yeah, if you have a Colson Montgomery actually come up and perform the way he is projected or was projected to before he started falling off of prospect lists and had his lousy season last year. If he comes up and, it plays like a young Corey Seager, well, heck, that's a huge, huge addition to the team, right? If it turns out that Lenyn Sosa is what you and I have talked about, a guy that needs some adjustment period at every level, and he comes in and he is playing very, very well, regardless of what position he's playing. If he's hitting, that's a huge upgrade over Nicky Lopez, who was just never going to be an offensive force. If, and I understand what all these ifs get you, but if they are able to find something with Miguel Vargas or Brian Ramos, if they're able to find something with Chase Mydroth, if they are able to find something with Edgar Caro or Kyle Teal coming up behind the plate, in addition to what Corey Lee already brings to you, if Corey Lee can take a step forward, if any of the young pitchers start to figure it out. I mean, heck, look at what Sean Burke did at the end of last season. Now project that in the rotation the entire year and remove Chris Flexen from it, okay? And the disappointments that he had. Or remove some of the guys that went out there and had one or two starts that were no good, right? Where they just got blown up. If those types of things happen, if Sean Burke has a reasonably good season, an above replacement level season as a starting pitcher, along with Jonathan Cannon and Drew Thorpe, yeah, you're going to have a much better, more solidified rotation. Having three guys that you can count on means that 3 out of the 5 days you feel pretty good, like you got at least a coin flip chance of winning a game. Last year, they didn't know what to expect on the mound. So you'd come out, and sometimes they would come out and be down really fast, really early, and the game was over because the offense was never going to be capable of making a comeback because they couldn't sustain it.
And the pitchers were pressing because they knew that they had no offense behind them.
Right. And if you know you're not going to get run support, what do? You have to throw it on your shoulders and you got to strike out 27 guys. And nobody can operate that way. Randy Johnson couldn't operate that way.
That's the key to this year. That's Venable's job this year, is to make sure those pitchers understand that it's not their job to score runs. And to manage in a way where if you're scratching out runs, then scratch out runs. You've got to find a way to get offense, even on the days where it looks like it's going to be hard to get the runs. You've got to find a way to put a crooked number up on the board. You want to make sure that at the end of the day, these pitchers are looking up there saying, well, we did get 3 runs. We did get 4 runs. They're not trying to pitch perfect games out there, because with these young guys, that's going to be an issue. So that's the hardest thing about building a team, right?
Blow saves.
That's the hardest thing about building a team, right? If everything's bad, your offense is bad, your pitching is young, you're trying, one can actually drain the other one. And so again, that's the main storyline for the season. It's not the wins and the losses. It's, can you start to build a feeling amongst these players that they can win games, that it's not all on somebody individually, that they do have the skill, and that more help is coming, and a loss isn't the biggest deal in the world. Shake it off and keep going. What did you do in your game today? Because I'm going to tell you right now, if Drew Thorpe or Jonathan Cannon or even Mason Adams gets up here, whoever it is, Sean Burke, any of these players come out and pitch. Noah Schultz gets here eventually. Hagen Smith gets here eventually. And they're only getting a win 1 out of every 4 appearances. One of these guys who pitches most of the season ends up with something like 15 losses, goes 5-15. But I look at his whip, and it's sitting at a 1.25 or better. And I'm looking at his earned run average. He hasn't given up a ton of runs. And his fielding independent pitching makes sense. I don't care about the wins and losses. And that's the thing that they're going to have to impress upon these pitchers. And that's something that they're going to have to impress upon the entire team. It is a team sport, but your individual performance is really what matters most, I think, for every player on the White Sox this year. If the team is bad and Andrew Vaughn goes out and finally realizes his potential, becomes a 4-WAR player, and you're like, holy cow, they fixed something in him, that is a bigger win than whatever the wins and losses are at the end of the year. That's a bigger deal for this team. But again, I think you're going to see something better. I put them over 62 wins. I put them under 100 losses, and I cannot wait for everybody to make fun of me for that.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.